Keep your senses. Be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, walks about like a roaring lion, seeking to devour someone. Keep your senses. Be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, walks about like a roaring lion, seeking to devour someone.
Yeah. So I said same thing. I don't know why I said that. So what happens if someone signs up and says, I don't want to go door to door? I said every publisher isn't a
Mm-hmm.
pastor.
Mm-hmm.
So you're comparing apples to oranges. You guys
Mm.
don't preach sermons at all.
Mm.
That's what he's trying. You know what I mean? So it's like you're not a pastor.
It's not surprising that Ryan missed a point here. Granted, a preacher is different from a pastor. I just wanted to look that up through the website, just Google it, just to see what it says. The difference between preacher and pastor is that a preacher is someone who spreads the word of God and does not perform any formal duties of the congregation. But a pastor, on the other hand, is someone who has a more formal role and is said to oversee the congregation and guide it towards salvation. So clearly there is a difference. And let's see, what is the difference between a pastor and a minister? A minister is a person who performs religious functions such as teaching. A pastor is the religious head of a single church. The minister has to maintain to coordinate in the church activities such as administration, teaching, preaching, ministerial sacraments, etc. And this is an interesting website. I don't agree with fully what it says. But this is what it says. People of Christian faith are often confused between two of the prominent figures of a congregation, the pastor and the preacher. Most people use the terms interchangeably, like Ryan, which can be fine for some since some pastors are also preachers. Even church members mistake one with the other, and most of the time they are corrected by the said pastor or preacher. Preachers technically are the one who proclaim and spread the word of God, like every baptized Jehovah Witness publisher. They are usually great motivational speakers. Preachers do not necessarily perform pastoral works unless the particular preacher is also a pastor by vocation. Mm. However, it is not common for pastors nowadays to also become preachers of their congregation. Usually there is someone else given the duty to preach, such as a preacher. I was shocked when I read that. I would think a pastor always has to be a preacher, but that's interesting. I never heard such a thing until I read this. The term pastor is rooted on its meaning of origin as shepherd, since shepherd is associated as an overseer of the flock. It is, it is just appropriate that an overseer of a congregation is called a shepherd. Pastors, being shepherd, guide their church members towards salvation. Technically, pastor functions as the physical, spiritual, relational, and social administration of a congregation. Often, pastors are called elders. That's what I was going to say too. To a Jehovah Witness, that's equivalent to an elder. They are the local church leaders that are qualified to give counsel to those in need of spiritual, emotional, and even financial help. They are the authority of local congregations, but shall not exceed outside of it. In some cases, there is possibility that a man can serve of both functions, being a pastor and a preacher. It is fine, but somehow administering to a local congregation is a great deal of work. Preaching is one of the duties of a pastor usually surrenders. Therefore, preachers are often designated to assist the task of proclaiming the word of God. Um, yeah, I'm not sure about that, but clearly there is a difference between a pastor, a pastor and a preacher. But like I said, a pastor is the equivalent to what Jehovah Witnesses would call an elder. But biblical speaking, my point still remains. Would a pastor need to take a step down if they didn't preach? And I'm kind of mad at myself that I didn't stick to that point because that's one of the duties of a pastor to preach. Ryan can also see that, but he doesn't understand the difference of the two. Maybe you should ask your own pastor what's the difference, Ryan. That's what I would suggest and recommend.
And he said with Jehovah Witnesses, I think he said we are all ministers.
Hey, now that was
Ministers. So
that was a Freudian slip, but
yeah, right. He said, so it's the same thing. Answer the question, minister. So you're not minister. They don't do talks. Are they leading? That's what I told him. I said,
There's a difference between a minister and a pastor, Ryan.
and he's changing the topic. I said, would someone be considered non-active? So I'm trying to give him the answer so he can kind of put it together. Just be honest. Just tell me what you. I shouldn't even have to pull it out of you.
like pulling teeth.
Exactly. I said, would someone be considered non-active if they don't submit their non-biblical hour requirement? He said, he said, before we change topics, answer my question, stop jumping. I said, okay, what's your question? You never answer mine. And he said, so he wants me to answer if the preacher decided not to preach, does the status change? I said, once again, you aren't a preacher to know their status wouldn't change. We don't have
It's alarming that he doesn't know the difference between the two terms. If he understood the difference of these two terms, he would be able to see how weak his argument is. And we see Jay is on the same boat because he doesn't correct Ryan, but obviously he doesn't even understand the difference either between a pastor and a preacher. This is shocking and alarming, and people actually listen to these two? Wow.
biblical labels in Christianity. So then he went up and answered my question, and he said, when I asked him if someone signs up and says, I don't want to go to preach, if I don't want to go door to door, what happens? And he says, it depends on the circumstances.
Oh, now it depends on.
You notice that? Did you see how he slipped from didn't want to preach or didn't want to go door to door? You see how? What did he say? Christians aren't required to submit non-biblical hour requirements and submit that they talk and how many papers they handle out. That's a non-biblical. So let's get back to my question. What happens of the status if you don't preach? You see? I didn't even see that. You see how he just changed the argument? What happens to your status if you don't preach? Wow. Yeah, that wasn't his initial argument. No, his argument was we're required to go door to door, not preach. I didn't catch that, but I was following.
Circumstances, okay.
Which we know that the elders are probably not going to be too. They're not going to have a lot of grace unless you have a really good answer on why you can't go. Because we've seen the I don't know. I'm pretty sure you've seen some of those elder videos when they kind of walking through.
Everything they are saying, we see how wrong they are from a copy of a letter from the Watchtower Society that Greg Stafford already produced in his book. So everything they are saying on this topic about turning time is moot. It's silly. They don't know what they're talking about.
How they deal with situations and how you know someone's a pioneer and they're not getting hours, what they're gonna have to do, and so we understand.
They look like handlers, honestly, in all intents and purposes.
So I told them Christians aren't required to submit non-biblical hour requirements and submit who they talk to and how many papers they handed out. That's not biblical.
It's like saying this. He is right to become a special pioneer or a pioneer, auxiliary pioneer. These hours are required. We never said it was biblical, right? It's like saying the same thing. It's not required. It's nowhere required that you have to get a degree to become a pastor. That's not biblical. You see, it's not. But in some churches, and I'm sure yours as well, a degree is necessary. Maybe you might want to check on that, because from my understanding, with most churches, a degree is required to become a pastor. That's not biblical. But this is a red herring argument because we never said that this is a biblical requirement. You're the one who's saying it's a biblical requirement. We never said that.
So let's get back to my question. What happens to your status if you don't preach? So he doesn't answer my question. And he says, you don't have any biblical labels in your Christianity, but you have a pastor. And he starts laughing.
I misread what he said about pastor. I thought he said we don't have labels in our church. That's the reason why I made that comment. But that's my mistake on my part for misreading what he typed. He's right about that.
I can show him where the pastor's in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, pastors are actually, biblical, but can you answer my question and stop running? He's trying to change the topic.
Yeah.
And he says, what is your question I didn't answer?
The one who's
I said, so
changing the topic.
what happens if someone doesn't want to participate? Does their status change? So he says his answer is not changing. I said, so the answer is yes. So what does it change to, and what are the consequences? I just lay it out for me. So he says the same concept. Yeah, it's take real long route. So he says,
if you understood the difference between a pastor and a preacher, there wouldn't be no long route. This is your bad, not mine. Learn what terms mean first, Ryan, and you too, Jay. There is no long route. Learn these words. Words have meaning, but obviously you don't care about stuff like that.
The same consequences as your pastor, he would have to step down if he can't fulfill requirements. So I said, okay. So so once again, you don't preach sermons, so you're comparing apples to oranges, so they become inactive, which is not biblical.
Yep.
So let me get the publication that says it's required and you can't be baptized until you participate.
Hey, you.
Now this is important. You'll see how Ryan starts changing the argument here, and I just noticed it too based on his text, where he changed the argument from it's required to go door to door, and now he's talking about preaching. You'll see how he changes the argument now. He's following Jay's lead now.
You are you're killing the game right now because everything. I finally got my hands on it. I have the organized to do Jehovah's will, and right here, everything you saying, boom, boom. Like I already got to the part, your personal field service reports and what happens, and dealing with the inactive and what you should be doing, and as it relates, it says. He says in the columns titled booklets, and brochures and individual magazines list the total numbers of any of these publications that you placed with people who are not dedicated, baptized, or witnessed. And you have to log your return visits. So is that each time a home Bible study is conducted, it should be counted as a return visit. Everything you're talking about is literally broken.
Actually, it's not, Jay, because nowhere in that publication does it say going door to door is required, and that's been Ryan's argument this whole time. But you're not paying attention to the argument based on your previous statement.
Down in this book, like you don't. So this is where we're at. So now he's trying to twist it around, make you prove that going door to door or preaching the word is not a requirement. Go to such lengths to think that this is not a requirement.
Yeah.
Poor Jay. He's not even on the same page as Ryan. Ryan's claim, is it required for Jehovah's Witnesses to go door to door? I clearly I deny that, and he is saying that it's what I'm saying is what is required is preaching. He is saying door to door, right? That's been the argument this whole time. You keep thinking I'm saying preaching is not required. Well, nowhere in any shape or form did I say that. In fact, that same book, Organized to Do Jehovah's Will, on page 96, on page 9, Methods of Preaching the Good News. Let me read a portion of that. Page 96. This is what it says. In addition to preaching from house to house, we must search for people elsewhere. Publishers have been successful in calling on people at places of businesses. Street witnessing has proved to be very effective in many countries, as has witnessing in parks, in parking lots, on public transportations, or wherever people can be found. As a result, individuals who are not at home when publishers call may be contacted with the good news. Now, I challenge you, Jay. Show me anywhere in that publication where it says it's required to go door to door. Does it encourage us to go door to door? Absolutely. Like on page 94. It says this: according to your personal circumstances, are you having a full share in the house to house ministry? If you are taking advantage of every opportunity to do so, we know that you are reaping a rich reward of joy and personal satisfaction in your service to God. The house to house ministry may not be easy for you. You you may have physical limitations, or you may be assigned to work territory where many people are not inclined to listen. There may even be governmental restrictions with which to cope. Because of your personality makeup, you may find it very difficult to initiate conversations with total strangers, and must therefore overcome a measure of anxiety each time you engage in the house to house ministry. Do not be discouraged. Your circumstances are not unlike those of your brothers in many other places. So, either you're not on the same page on what's being discussed, which Ryan should have corrected you, or you're intentionally misrepresenting my position. I think you're just lost.
Like seriously. I mean, I'm trying to say. Hold on. Let's see, there's another one I saw. Um, he says once the elders determine that the Bible student qualifies to engage in the field ministry, he is
Mhm.
eligible to receive his own copy of the organized to do Jehovah's Will. After he reports his field service hours for the first time, a brief announcement should be made to the congregation that he
Wow.
is a new unbaptized publisher.
Now, what you just read, Jay, and started giggling and laughing, whose point are you proving? Mine or Ryan's? Hmm? Hmm? What you read, it mentions nothing about going door to door, right? So whose point are you proving? Hmm? Hmm?
hmm Hold up that book one time so everybody can
Yes,
see
sir.
it.
Hold it
Yeah,
up, Jay.
yeah.
Hold it up,
Organized
Jay.
to do Jehovah's Will.
Yes, hold it up, Jay. And now you have a task. Prove it in that book that you have that it says it's required to go door to door. This is based on the discussion that we're having now with my position and with Ryan's position. Everything you're saying, you just proved my point.
Ah!
Yeah, this is
ah!
the full breakdown. It's on. I would start on page 78, where
hmm
it literally speaks about
Meeting the requirements. Yeah.
yeah, meeting the requirements. But this is where it actually starts, where it talks about
New publishers.
nukes, and
Wow.
it has a full breakdown of
Mm.
what it is, and it and what I like to do is I actually put a definition of the word publisher,
hmm
because at the end of the day they may call themselves Jehovah's Witnesses, they might even call themselves Christians, but no, they're actual publishers. And a publisher is a person or company that produces and sells books, magazines, newspapers, software, or etc. That's who they are. Like there's no ambiguity behind it because this is what's being pushed to you. And it says this is an important step in teaching new ones to be followers of Jesus Christ. So this, in order to be able to teach, you need to be a publisher.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, yeah. So everything you're saying right now, honestly, their publications, back your argument up.
Yeah.
So,
Actually, they don't. Let's run that beautiful footage again to see what my argument was.
Back me up.
woo. So this is where we're at. So now he's trying to twist it around, make you prove that going door to door or preaching
You
preaching
had it
the
right
word
the first
is not a
time.
requirement. Okay, so this is where we're at. So now he's trying to twist it around, make you prove that going door to door or preaching the word is not a requirement. Well,
So nothing what Ryan is saying is backed up with that publication you just read. It says nothing about going door to door is required. And I'm challenging you, Jay, show your audience where it says that. It doesn't.
Ah!